Is someone there? Oh, I didn't see you there. Hi, my name is Toini, but you can call me Tony if it's easier. And, welcome to my show. Shounen is a collection of Japanese stories made for adolescent to bordering adult boys. Like any genre, a lot of stories deviate from this mission statement a bit, but that is the gist of what defines the genre. This is nothing new. Over in the West, we have the big two comics made in sort of the same vein, and if you grew up on cable television, there were enough shows catered towards boys that networks could dedicate entire blocks to them. Given how male-dominant most media is, it's no surprise that shonen are generally very popular and have garnered widespread appeal, but some people are ashamed of that fact. There's this stigma shonen has for being simple-minded and childish. That's where the idea of soft seinen comes from, because if the genre they enjoy is for kids, then what does that say about those who like it? But I'm here to tell you that's nonsense. If anything, the stories we enjoy tell us to not be embarrassed of who we are. Us embracing the genre we enjoy so much, instead of acting like it's inherently inferior, since it's essentially kids or preteen media, will breed greater discussions and conversations about it. Especially because, if you really think about it, shonen is as diverse as they come, filled with subgenres and subcultures galore. Whether it be the gracefully horny Call of the Night with its insomnia-soothing romance, or Frieren with its focus on nostalgia, shonen actually have a knack for people just sort of hanging out. For example, you remember the moe boom of the late 2010s? Shows like Lucky Star are actually shonen as well. I mean, KyoAni is literally adapting a Shonen Jump series next year. One of my first shows was Death Note. I mean, isn't that crazy? Right alongside the big three was a high-octane cat and mouse story only a few pages away from One Piece and the like. Another favorite of mine is Mob Psycho, a story that feels like mini Sunday comic strips. You also have the rom-coms like Spy Family and Komi Can't Communicate. Stories like Blue Box combine rom-com elements with a typical sports manga story. And speaking of sports, if you're someone who wants a group of friends bonding over an activity, but you need something a bit more masculine, there's like a bajillion sports series to choose from. I say all that to say, there's just something about these stories that are so colorful, jam-packed with things to talk about, be inspired from, analyze, good, bad, especially ugly. What type of person do you have to be to make stories like this? And I think that question is what keeps me coming back. Sure, most manga artists aren't saints, and some of these stories have flaws atop of flaws. But with how sincere shonen can be, what with big casts, heartfelt themes, ideologies that make you think, and world building or power systems that are such strokes of creativity, it's hard not to feel motivated to discover new stories that might be hiding away in a magazine that you might have never heard of. Now, I know I just got done giving the shonen genre a lot of praise, but come on, we both know why we're here. The shonen genre can be great and diverse, but it can also be disappointing. You know the feeling, following a piece of work for years, even a full decade, only for the story not to really end the way you wanted it to. And worse yet, a few months later, whether it be an epilogue, a sequel series, or an anime OVA, you realize the author isn't quite done digging a grave for their audiences. No story can be perfect, and it's only natural that in a work culture as strenuous as the weekly manga cycle, burnout, rushed endings, not clearly planned out or even possibly unresolved plotlines is totally normal and unfortunately expected. But it does still suck when you're a fan of something and, maybe in small ways, maybe in big ways, it starts to not really feel like the same story anymore. I don't want to be a negative Nancy, but I also don't want to be a positive Pete either. I think this is a safe space, so let's sit down and discuss why the shonen genre can sometimes not live up to its own potential.
There's an intruder in my house. He caught my phone line, can't dial out. I scream for police, but I doubt they're gonna hear me when I shout.
Hi, my name is Naya, and and I am tired. Japanese animation has to be one of the most influential subcultures out there, especially in the early 2000s. Sure, we had our fair share of more serious cartoons like Ben 10, Samurai Jack, Danny Phantom, and other shows adapting comic books, but Western animation was built upon the ease of episodic comedies. The idea that a child could watch any given episode of any given show and understand what the hell was going on. Serialization didn't become a norm until maybe a decade ago. Anime was different. Toonami captivated so many millennials and Gen Zers when we were all probably too young to even watch such material. Emotionally poignant, filled with melodrama, high-octane actions, and more palpable struggles for Western kids, even with a language barrier. Naruto's experiences being all too similar to young black kids, Bleach's early punk and coming-of-age tone, stuff like that. The West took note of this appeal and churned out a few shows of their own. Let's call them anime dupes. You know what I'm talking about. Avatar: The Last Airbender and Teen Titans. One was a show about culture, how those cultures must coexist in a way that doesn't hamper the other, and how deafening pain can come from those who think their culture is better than another. And while Teen Titans was a part of the aforementioned comic book action cartoon lineup, it stylistically made itself distinct with its more jagged edges and the type of exaggerated Eastern angst that a teenager would find in a shonen. Both shows also had a colorful cast of characters that felt like real people, and stakes that exceeded what the status quo from a typical Saturday morning cartoon would allow. These shows dealt with more mature topics, and had characters that any person growing up at the time could attach themselves to. And well, attach themselves they did. Anime at the time was still niche, but the West's industry admiration for it created a bridge that allowed fans of anime dupes to discover and/or accept the real thing. But this started a chain reaction of fandom chaos. It was like a teenager getting high for the first time in their lives. Now that they've had their first hit, they wanted more. But what did more mean in this instance? Well, they didn't only want more of the type of media that captivated their interest, they wanted a deeper emotional connection to that media, by any means necessary. Which is where the idea of the parasocial fan comes from. The type of fan that demands affirmations towards their headcanons and involvement in a piece of work that never considered them in the first place. Let's talk. There's an argument to be had whether or not pieces of media can be judged by the type of fandom it has. After all fandoms are terrible in their own way. How could it be the writer's fault for such a shitty online space? Me personally, I've always said you could tell a lot about an author by what type of person they attract. Let me explain that. Art is a feedback loop. When someone moves from one fandom to another, when someone takes their influences with them when making a show, when an entire cable network shares the same building, overlaps are bound to happen. It can be as simple as a writer of Arcane loving She-Ra and The Legend of Korra. It could be as hilarious as Toby Fox composing for Homestuck, or Rebecca Sugar working on Adventure Time. Maybe it's the fact that Voltron animators have their fingers in every show in the industry apparently. This type of overlap wouldn't usually be a problem for me, but it's a bit deeper than the animation world being small in my opinion. Something that has always stood out to me, for example, was how much of a fanboy Gege and Ishida were. If you don't know, around the time of Tokyo Ghoul's release in Jujutsu Kaisen's early days, each of them were interviewed by their heroes. In Ishida's case, it was Togashi, who wrote Hunter x Hunter. In Gege's case, it was Tite Kubo, who wrote Bleach. Read the interviews for yourself. The two of them are pretty much pissing themselves due to their proximity to their heroes, but who wouldn't be? What's the problem? Well, during Ishida's interview, to make a long story short, he makes reference to something he found interesting in Hunter x Hunter. Again, you can read it yourself, but basically every time Hisoka talks in the manga, there's a symbol attached to the speech bubble. Ishida figured Hisoka's diamond symbols meant seriousness, and his clover symbol is used when he's being intuitive. Togashi's response? Well, basically he said he didn't give it much thought. This is a very small part of their exchange, but allow me to make a mountain out of it. Because I could be an asshole and make note of the fact that just like their fans, Ishida and possibly Gege came to the conclusions that were reaches at best and totally made up at worst. How, just like their fans, they will prescribe meaning where there is none, but ignoring that. It's interesting, right? Bleach is a very dense manga. It's convoluted, but that's what people like about it. Hunter x Hunter has autistic levels of intricacies in its writing. Tokyo Ghoul is dark and moody, and Jujutsu Kaisen has implicit symbolism that calls back to Japanese mythology, and the like. Not only are all of these series similar, but they share the same fucking fans, most hibernating from the Attack on Titan fanbase. And if you know anything about that series, yeah, makes sense. Kubo, Gege, Ishida, and Togashi are all philosophy nerds that weave through complicated topics with a darker atmosphere than others in their genre. The fans are like that too. Kubo and Gege specifically, even though they are wrongfully touted as woke, have a lot of traditional values, both even having character arcs about the main character ending up as nothing but a weapon. In the same way, in my experiences, when it comes to self-expression and rather left-leaning thinking, well, take it from me, if these pseudo-intellectual fans don't aspire to rock an ICE logo, they might fuck around and get the Punisher logo tatted on their arm. Which is hilarious because most of them don't even live in the US. You know, where this sort of Western conservatism spawns from. Hell, most of them aren't even from Eastern continents. White people love to use the word LARP, but they're literally missing a whole subset of internet dwellers that word actually applies to. And the kicker is, most of them are people of color. There's already a rampant problem with red pill thinking in the black community, and unfortunately in my experiences, it's no better in these circles. Throwing slurs at people they disagree with, minimizing their voices, being ignorant to how the world has changed, it's a genuine shithole. Appealing to the politics of a white man that won't ever like you. My point is this, it's not a rule of thumb or anything, but some of the worst fan bases I've had the displeasure of dealing with have fans that are essentially flanderized versions of the writers they worship. Keep that in mind as we move forward. Toini,
Naya?
can I help you with something?
Oh, I don't know. You can help me find out where you got your audacity from.
Ouch.
I told you to keep this video chillin' low-key.
I mean, what could be more low-key than literally no one watching?
You know exactly what I mean. I know we're in the critique business, but we can still be light and have fun with it. Don't you have anything constructive to say?
I am being constructive. I'm constructing reasons for why white people suck.
You suck.
And you have a spider in your hair.
As if I'd fall for that. Whatever, just you do your thing and I do mine, okay? Let's talk about the post-Big Three, aka the 2010 Shounen Renaissance period. What a time to be alive! While these three titans shared the same space, the same magazine, they couldn't be any more different. Take Yuki Tabata's Black Clover and Gege Akutami's Jujutsu Kaisen. Classic shonen versus soft seinen, porn for the hard workers, black coffee for the jaded, the optimistic, the thoughtful, black and blue, day versus night, all that fun Zack Snyder jazz. You get the picture. It goes without saying that there is absolutely nothing wrong with either approach to storytelling. Heck, it's possible for someone to like both. It's also sensible that one would hate both. Whether eagerly positive or asinine critical, Black Clover and Jujutsu Kaisen show a different meta perspective when it comes to the shonen genre, the manga medium as a whole, and well, the greater Japanese culture at large, which we'll get to in a sec. But the thing about polar opposite approaches to storytelling is that you can't be both. When you try to be both, your writing becomes inconsistent, theming becomes muddled, and your greater author's purpose is, well, let's just say there's room for debate as to what you're even trying to say. For example, Black Clover is a lot of things. Silly, a little immature, but it's also quite wholesome. A story about a group of misfits making something of themselves in such a prejudicial class system. However, I do think as the series went on, its wholesomeness was its very downfall. It's almost scared of diving into the deep end, so it stays on shallow waters for most of its run. What I mean is, it has these big bombastic war arcs where no one ever dies. The characters get stronger, but in no way that creates conflict among themselves. It yells from the rooftops, "Friendship is magic!" but never tests that friendship in any way that would change the status quo. In fact, the only major status quo change is just the caste moving up in the world's class system. And of course, I'm happy for them, they're my children, but wouldn't it be so much more impactful if the characters truly struggled and lost things along their way to the top? Black Clover is hellbent on sustaining the positive vibes, so to speak. All the characters must get their way, their ideologies must stay unchallenged, and the whole series is a hodgepodge of earnest hope. Hope that has no darkness to broadcast its ray of sunshine through, which is where its Mickey Mouse image comes from. Why should we root for characters when they don't even need our support in the first place? The story will just give them what they've always wished for anyway. There's a reason for that, or at least a theory I have. Are you guys familiar with the idea of comfort characters? You look at a character, or maybe even an entire cast, and choose to think about them when you're at your lowest. And it's valid. I mean, fiction consumption and even the creative process allow for that sort of escapism. As an author, you have to decide if your characters will fulfill the void left inside of you, or be a vent or therapy session on why that void exists. Which actually brings me to Jujutsu Kaisen. JJK is so cold and callous towards its characters, and while that certainly is the point, it goes further beyond thematic presentation and more to do with I think are Gege's more unfortunate priorities with storytelling. JJK affirms the character statuses as self-proclaimed weapons for a system that doesn't care about them, and if they're lucky enough to die of natural causes, their efforts will be stepped on to appease extraterrestrials 60 to 70 years in the future. Whether it be the loneliness of Gojo, the claustrophobic Jujutsu work culture that drove both Geto and Nanami insane, or how by the end of the story, despite his attempts at giving his role a positive meaning, Yuji Itadori was until his elderly years a cog. A person's life being so meaningless outside of their purpose from birth is so etched into the vocabulary of Jujutsu Kaisen that it goes beyond meta-social commentary and is literally an ironic description of how the story treats its own characters. Gege is a fight geek, a mystery nerd, a symbolism junkie, a dark comedy aficionado who loves dramatic irony, and in my opinion, he knows this. He knows where his own strengths as a writer lie, and as such, a lot of the time, he chooses not to focus on the finer details when it comes to characters because that's just not that important to him, and that's totally valid. It's his story, not mine. But I will say, it does unfortunately get in the way of my own personal investment, or in general accentuates how depressing the theming truly can seem when it comes to the personal freedoms and individuality of the characters. I say all of this to paint a picture. Black Clover is a story that, for whatever reason, prioritizes comfort fantasies for the characters living inside of it, instead of proper stakes. Jujutsu Kaisen wants to show that fantasizing is pointless because who you're meant to be will be forced on you by a system or the literal writing style of the story, whether you like it or not. Real meaning is found, well, in reality. One is a dream and the other is a critique. Two completely different and once again equally valid ways of handling a story. Two conflicting ways of handling a story. And now that I've painted a picture in just how opposite these worldviews are, in a literary sense, I hope it's made you realize why the series I have yet to mention could never work in my opinion, because its mission statement was to bridge both writing ideologies. And with that, I think it's time to talk about My Hero Academia. Again.
Western cartoons nowadays appeal and encourage liberal lifestyles. This is because they are born and or appeal to minority experiences, whether that be people of color, queer people, mentally or physically disabled people, which is great, obviously. But if you actually think about the beliefs some of these creators push, you'd be surprised by how disenfranchising they really are. Look at the way Arcane treats a character like Jinx. The literal embodiment of a revolutionary movement is killed off so the writer's ship can survive, a ship that is only possible because her sister becomes a cop. Voltron famously queerbaits, and I don't even want to get into whatever the fuck Vizzy Pops' politics are. Even the cartoon with the first ever gay marriage humanized antagonists that are basically super space Hitlers. Steven Universe fans shiver at this criticism, but it is the exact type of white kumbaya nonsense that makes people think they can coexist with people that hate their existence. Toxic fans. Whether they be the overly sensitive, the distracted shipper, the defense forces that demand positivity, or the annoyingly pretentious, pollute the space with their vices, especially the fans that want everything to conform to their worldviews or headcanons. It's made worse by the fact they're given permission to write more shows that produce more of these types of fans. Shows that ruin their own themes and writing for the sake of their own agenda. Agendas that, say, future toxic shippers can further feed off of. I'm referencing toxic shipping a lot, but Don't get the wrong idea. It is merely one example of behavior out of a list of like the 100 behaviors that show just how much fans make art less about the art and more about themselves. And because media like this keeps being made, regardless of quality, the problem has become even more widespread and frequent.
Everything I've heard through the grapevine or assessed through these manga stories tells me that Japan has an individuality problem. Not to say that their culture is inherently inferior to ours, as in America, our problem is often we let certain people stand out more than they probably should, counting or not counting sorcerer violence and all of that, but it's easy to get a sense that these mangaka are tired. A society that decides what box you should fill for the rest of your life, an endless grind at a work culture that condemns you for not working at 120% of your power, a social hierarchy that rewards normacy and punishes anyone who might be different. And to me, My Hero Academia was always a story that wanted to deconstruct that. Quirks were a disease, but they were glamorized. The glowing baby got all of the attention because the real first metahumans were born of a prostitute in nowhere Tokyo. We put these heroes on a pedestal even though they are incapable of saving the dredges of society that really matter. In fact, the system is so bad that it's self-aware of this, sweeping these social scars under the rug so we don't have to deal with such an ugly truth. And we've convinced someone who's quirkless that he's so worthless to this current society that he has to be on the verge of killing himself for our sake to even be recognized as a hero. But we can't even give him that much. After all, post-war, no one could even really tell he was a hero. Hiding from reality solves nothing. It's only through looking at depravity straight in the eyes where we can realize what exactly about our behaviors we ought to change so that broken children don't have to become villains or have to become isolated heroes with the fate of the world on their shoulders. Except, how deeply did MHA actually want to delve into these topics? Comic book culture is very important to the idea of My Hero Academia. I mean, duh, it's literally called My Hero Academia, but it goes beyond similar tropes or iconography to me. You see, for a long time in my eyes, the story seemed to want to deconstruct the sort of idealism found in these Western myths, an idealism that coincidentally seems to be at the heart of Japanese angst. But is this idealism a beautiful lie, or the foundation of inspirational escapism? Remember, as an author, you have to decide if you're going to be a comfort fantasy or a critique. And at first, MHA was happy to call out society at large for the way it treats people. But for whatever reason, in the final stretch of MHA, it seems to say that the solution to society's pitfalls isn't staring into the face of a reality check, but a story about what society could look like if everyone was 22% more agreeable.
Is 22% a lot? Well, I'm not going to tell you what percentage of our time together I'm usually mean to you because it'll hurt your stupid feelings, but 22 is substantial. You're gonna feel the difference.
And again, there is nothing wrong with using fiction as a safe space, but in choosing to become one non-committally when we're in the last stretch of the story, well, honestly, in my opinion, the story thoroughly breaks because of it. Deku had his I am here moment with Tenko, only for Tomura to be taken over by All for One, even though his character was already concluded, with him and Bakugo realizing they are not the main character or the main villain. In addition, Deku losing his powers isn't heartwarming because he realizes he's the same hero without them, it's tragic. The second he loses his powers, his friends start to have no real time for him, and it's only through power armor that he becomes a real hero again. Sure, Deku says that being a teacher is just as meaningful, and I agree, but if the story agreed, the chapter wouldn't have ended with him getting the power suit, and implied that he's been left alone for almost a decade while powerless without it. The final episode to me shows how indecisive the story has been during its last stretch when it comes to the fight between hope and reality. Not everyone gets the dream they wanted, and it's fine, because Izuku can be even more down to earth by teaching at UA. But because the story is so reliant on being hopecore, it unintentionally says that none of that is good enough. All while, again, breaking the logic of the story when in its first chapter, it told us that no, people can't be heroes without quirks. Ideologically, sure, but logistically, Deku would have died to Stain if not Shoto first. I can't say this for sure, but in my opinion, during the story's first and second acts, Aoyama would have been punished. Maybe not harshly, but as someone who expedited the downfall of Hero Society and the number one's career, endangering so many of his classmates, I don't think a party would have been thrown for his departure. I don't think Dabi, Endeavor, or Endeavor's career and seeming life with his wife would survive. I don't think Bakugo would either, especially in the way he does. I don't think Mirio would have returned as soon as he did either, and I don't think a character like Hux would be expected to hold the commission on his shoulders. To be honest, I doubt he'd be alive either. But in MHA's hopecore era, a lot of the tension that could come from these conflicts is replaced with a sense that the characters' worldviews and present circumstances will persevere no matter what, never to be really challenged or changed. And as much as the story was infested with school arcs, there was always a conscious effort, to me, to properly separate who weren't and were important. In this new hopecore era of MHA, everyone's as equally as important as the other. I think Mineta has more lines than Kirishima in the final act. The story is so eager to maintain the status quo that, and I'll get to this later, the students go through 2 different wars in a 3 to 4 month span and are expected to just go back to school, some even getting a graduation. And the thing is that the final arc has moments that aren't contradictory to the types of emotional beats MHA has always set out to do. Supporting characters becoming stars, lost children being carried across city blocks, a smile being cute, reaching out to help when it seems counterintuitive, grabbing the hands you've denied for so long, even with some of the villains having their hatred triumph over forces set to oppose them. These are not only moments that do still feel like the old MHA, but are moments Horikoshi clearly felt immense passion for, which is felt in how much those plot points resonated with audiences. But the plot, power system, tone, character writing, world building had to contort so much to make these moments even possible, and in the end, in my opinion, it wasn't for much at all. Sure, we get this amazing moment with Ide carrying Todoroki across the battlefield, fulfilling their dynamic that has been set up ever since Stain, but that scene ends with the other Todorokis coming out of nowhere to save a son that they wouldn't even have to commit to giving their full attention to, since he was already on death's door. Despite the beautiful moment Ochako shared with Toga, Horikoshi unfortunately never gave her the power of surviving stab wounds, so Toga dies despite a future where people like her could be themselves while feeling free being basically just a few short hours away. Spinner turns from a burdened heteromorph to a Neanderthal with no room in his brain for revolutionary arguments. And I don't mean this in a derogatory way, I mean he literally has no thoughts in his head. Eri healing the hands that once saved her, but having to be mutilated just to do it. Deku finally being cheered on for who he is, inspiring others by virtue of his weakness, but that moment comes at the cost of his powers in a more personal conclusion for Shigaraki. Keep in mind, Deku is the only main character to not have a proper or finished 1v1. Stars and Stripes battle was unfortunately pretty pointless, artificially inflating a deadline Horikoshi himself posed, but it was used as a way to mentally scar Shigaraki so Deku can launch his quirks offensively into his Vestige. The Vestige fight every MHA fan dreamed of ever since joint training, an opportunity for Izuku and Tenko to finally connect to one another, and an opportunity for some Shimura closure, also an opportunity for a literal walk down memory lane. Only, I can't help but feel like this is not how quirks usually work.
Conversations revolving around the dangerous ideologies that lay under the surface of these kids' properties are often dismissed as mindless hatred. You were never really a fan if you think this way. The hate is overblown, unnecessary, maybe even homophobic, misogynistic, or ableist. And I'm not denying those who critique can lend themselves to harshly putting down certain groups along the way. But in my opinion, in my experiences, the only thing that's often overblown is the vitriol people share for good faith, well-meaning, or just very observant criticism. And there's a reason for that, because you're not only critiquing the shows that maybe you used to love, you're critiquing the only real identity some of these fans have. Look, if these stories speak to you a certain way, far be it from me to take that away from you. Hell, a lot of these stories were part of my childhood. That's why I can recall all of this stuff on a dime. And I don't know these creators personally. I'm sure the subtle racism only comes out after a few drinks, but a lot of the representation people love from these shows comes at the expense of those being represented. And fandoms not only let these writers get away with it, but again, because they are flanderized versions of these writers, they act way worse to people who ironically are different from them, silencing the voices of black people when they speak on their issues with the representation of these shows, or just anyone with criticisms. And I do mean any and all criticisms, all so that they can enjoy their pacifistic fantasies or whatever ship the show hooked them on. Because if they actually engaged with the stories we're talking about properly, then, well, the air would certainly be a lot different. And that goes for anime fan bases as well. And you ask, but Naya, if they're not engaging with the story at large, critically or otherwise, then what do people even do in these fan bases? Well, that's a stupid question. Obviously, all they do is argue. Mostly about stuff that doesn't matter, and mostly regarding notions they don't even fully understand. Due to the nature of this video, at the time of writing this, I'm sure I will not be able to document all of the annoying discourses that have started this year alone. Chainsaw Man fans, like usual, could not take any sort of criticism for their ending. My Hero Academia fans migrated to Gachiakuda, and it's been hell ever since. I mean, fuck, even when MHA was good in my eyes, conversations never were about the actual story, or the actual meta-narrative of the villains, or the series' talk about redemption, second chances, or discrimination. It was only ever about who was gonna fuck who. The author of Gachiakuta, Kai Arana, was asked directly if pirating her work was okay. Her streams are constantly raided with shipping discourse she's made clear that she does not want to discuss, and people were headcanoning her sexuality? This poor woman. It eventually got so bad that she deactivated her account, along with co-creator Hideyoshi Ando. Because black people on Twitter expect a Japanese woman to be culturally aware of black culture, or to not find a poorly made cosplay funny. Oh wait, if you guys were around for this, you would remember that a black person wasn't even the one who sparked the conversation in the first place. Over in the West, there was that discourse surrounding Toby Fox not translating Undertale or Deltarune into other languages because the process would make chapter waits even longer and he wants direct control of his work. That just wouldn't be easy even with a localization team. I don't know why people made such a stink of this. If you know anything about the Undertale fanbase, it's that Toby's story is misrepresented by people who speak the same language as him, let alone people who don't. It's 2026 and we're still arguing about Chris's pronouns. Look, I want to feel for Gooseworks, but apparently she put white girl politics into her show and into her sense of humor. So yeah, I refuse to touch that one. I do think the way people were moving about the show's film release was an overreaction, but then the whole thing leaked online, so again, not touching it. There's a sort of entitlement that comes from fandom, and it's not new, neither is it really bad. When you connect to a piece of work, identify yourself with it, there's a strong bond that's created. It's as if your soul harmonizes with someone else's. That's what makes art powerful, and everyone can act a little crazy when they become a fan of something. But there's something to be said about the crazed ownership certain people feel towards media they like. I mean, just look at the way they react to criticism. As stated before, any justifiable criticism given to a work in an act of passion or inquiry is seen as an attack on their personhood, because the piece of media has taken over their entire identity. Any perspective that differs from theirs is abhorrent and disgusting, even if it's from the creator themselves. It's gotten so bad, even a big creator like Mother's Basement, who for sure has fell victim to his takes being misconstrued or his character judged without the footwork being done of actually engaging with the video that's being dogpiled, will do the same for someone else, sending harassment my way and conveniently making an exception to his supposed "I don't pile on small creators" rule. This, along with a personal reason I can't get into, was my breaking point. Especially in retrospect, when I think of the mountains of conversations I've had with my peers and friends who were just not willing to understand how I viewed my own content. In an era where hours, weeks, months of work is dismissed because some idiot with a following on Twitter dictated their entire opinion of you on a thumbnail or a title they didn't like, then they send harassment your way for months on end via the few hundred, the few thousand people who just want to be part of a mob, and that behavior is exhibited by people who are veterans who should know better, and those closest continue to put no effort into understanding how this could all make you feel. Tell me, why would anyone want to stay inside that hellhole? What's the point of creating in a space that doesn't want you to create, that doesn't want you here, where you see your close friends or mutuals stray farther and farther away from you because of a fucking opinion you have?
Naya, we have to talk. I need you to... Are you editing upside down?
And you don't? Well, at least we know where all the whimsy went.
Whatever, I need to talk to you about something.
Yeah, I know. You do your thing, and I do mine. I heard you the first time.
No, I want you off of the project.
You know this is a fugazi, right? It doesn't matter how cute your little setup is. It doesn't matter how pretty you dress up your points. They will eat you alive regardless. You might as well just say what you really want to say.
God, you're miserable.
I'm sorry?
This is why we're alone. You're always so emotional, confrontational. I mean, there's no point in taking this personally. I just want to make a normal video.
And I just want to voice why we can't. Look at us, T. Feeling small, hated, left stranded in wherever the fuck this place is because people like us don't get a home anymore. How could I possibly just stay quiet about something like that?
Well, maybe if you did, people would like you as much as they like Jordan or Asa. Maybe you'd actually have people around you.
Why would you even say that?
I should go. I have an essay to wrap up. If we want to talk about the story breaking, the best example I could give you is Deku and Bakugo's team up to save All Might. The story's disappointing resolution to the Quirk Doomsday Theory made quirkless Shigaraki powerful enough to knock Bakugo's heart out of his chest. Best Genus and Edge Shot, sew his heart back together. Bakugo manages to secrete sweat inside of his body, making explosions capable of pumping his blood once again. All Might's arc of learning he's not worthless just because he's not quirkless is stepped on so he can don a power suit. A power suit that would have been very useful during Deku's vigilante days. This doesn't work and nearly gets him killed. Surprised he even lasted that long against All For One, honestly. And then, because of wishing magic, Bakugo manages to save him just in time, defeating Nine Eyes' prophecy, which... I mean, I don't know, I always assumed the prophecy was preferring the Kamino. This arc was always a balancing act of true heartfelt MHA moments that unfortunately had clearly unplanned ways of getting to them. But the way MHA breaks on itself for this moment is just so distracting for me that I can't even attempt to leverage it like I could the other moments. And it's made worse because, again, none of this really goes anywhere. It's not like this was Bakugo's final swan song. It's not like this was even the last squeak out of All For One. And it's not like the fight that Bakugo allowed Deku to have without distractions did anything for Izuku. If anything, it turned his life into a tragedy because he loses his powers, an event that he seems rather unbothered by. And when they're both adults, sure, they're respected as the two that saved All Might and stopped the bad guys, but that doesn't really change the fact that they're both rather mediocre pros. Both not even being able to crack the top 3 of the pro billboards, a ranking system that was literally the representation of the commercialization of hero culture, but seems to still exist in a post-League world that supposedly has been doing better. It's almost like MHA tried to combine the back to normal human life and job well done ending the characters got in Bleach and the conclusions Naruto characters got as actual benefactors of the new and improved society, especially in the expanded ending and the light novel adaptations from the anime. But again, that blends grounded realism with the happily ever after fantasy ending.
What? You back to condescend to me again?
Me condescend? That's a lot coming from...
My art isn't appreciated. I'm not accepted by others. I can't even be accepted by myself. So what's the point? I should just lie here. Maybe if I'm lucky, I'll be something people want around in the next life.
I told you you always take these things too seriously. I know, because I do too. I don't even like pink this much, Naya. You clocked me. I'm trying too hard. I guess I just want to be regular. and I hate the fact that my brain doesn't let me be. You deserve to have a voice too, even if it's one people don't want, or one that gets us in trouble. Are you still up for it? You think you can help me finish the video? In the vast multiverse, the Tree of Time, is there a version of MHA's final arc that works for me? If Horikoshi had more time to plan how these plot points manifested? If the final arc remained the same, but at the very least, the characters got the spotlights they deserved? Would the story be better off without most of the final arc's moments, no matter how tear-jerking some of them were? Would we be better off if the story ended with PLW around volume 30? Would Horikoshi committing to Heroes Rising be a better outcome as an ending? If Izuku never got the power suit in the final chapter, and the chapter had more time to flesh out his adult life, maybe adding elements from the volume DLC, would the chapter feel less bitter with really weird tonal whiplash at the end and feel more like true bittersweetness? Look at me, I'm dreaming. But again, there's nothing wrong with that. But no matter how much the final arc of MHA wanted me to dream, I have to face reality. The reality of the awful place the world is right now, and the reality of how the ending made me feel. And ironically, that deep introspective look inward and outward is exactly how MHA taught me to act towards these feelings that are difficult to understand and hard to deal with. And I guess in that way, the reason why My Hero Academia left me feeling so disappointed was because it decided not to listen to itself when it mattered most. That's how I think I would describe this era of shonen. Confused. Black Clover had so many plot lines it could have chased, the truth of Yami's clan conflict and what that means for him, his sister, and his partners in crime, the greater devil world at large, even the main character's deepest insecurities. But anything too serious would seem to undermine Tabitha's main priority, which is, as stated before, the comfort of the cast. Jujutsu Kaisen seems disillusioned with its own disillusionment. Despite the overbearing feeling of political stagnation by the end of the series, the characters oddly seem the happiest out of the new gen manga endings. This is ignoring the fact that, in my opinion, the heroes learning from the villains and the villains conceding to the heroes made it confusing as to what philosophy the story was truly sticking behind. And well, I think My Hero Academia is the very essence of scope creep. This is because the author, whether due to his own fears, his demographic rejecting his ideas, or the suits above him conditioning him to what he can or can't say, repeatedly shows us throughout the story that he consistently second guesses every one of his points of criticism towards Japan's ecosystem. And that's heartbreaking, but honestly, should any of it be surprising? Horikoshi seems so desperate to get to the moment of his story he's always dreamed of telling. So desperate, in fact, that he was willing to sacrifice his pacing, character writing, world building. But what's left after all of these big moments? The characters have to go back to school, heroes have to keep working, villains have to fade out as they're no longer a threat. There can't be that much of a status quo change. I mean, again, the series is called My Hero Academia, so as much as the series wanted to critique the setting it built for itself, that setting always had to exist to maintain the very premise of the show, no matter how much the passionate fans of the series, or even the author himself, wanted to change that. And I think that's the key. Tabitha is a student of the Big Three. Gege is a young writer who may have angsty millennial views, but views that have yet to be seasoned by age and literary experience. He's also too much of a fanboy to see the bigger picture. And Horikoshi couldn't prioritize his commitments, whether to himself, his fans, his demographic, shueisha suits, or Japanese culture conventions he seems so desperate to run away from. This period is marked by authors with so much to seemingly say, but for whatever reason, never being able to say in the way that maybe they wanted. And that's relatable, right? I mean, I have so many thoughts, so many feelings, and so much passion for this medium and the other interests of mine. But for one reason or another, my words never seem to be the right ones. In the end, as much as it pains me, and as much as I disagree with a lot of the ways these authors think regarding individuality or some of their writing choices, I can't ever be too mad at these creators. They're people too, and all 5 of us have something in common. No matter how long we've been in the game, no matter how much we try, no matter how well-meaning we are, it never seemed like we could truly reclaim shonen for ourselves. I guess you can't win them all.
It's no secret that my time in the MHA fanbase wasn't perfect. As I grow older, I tried to recognize all the ways I could have handled it better. What if I didn't say that in that way? What if I let my complaints stay in the group chat? What if I didn't conflate mutual with friend? What if I didn't pick so many fights when the manga was so close to finishing? Knowing you've hurt people, knowing that people got to see your awkward late teen years as you navigate a social life you were never equipped for, knowing that people didn't see who you actually were and instead saw a version of you that was burdened with pain and betrayal from a community you once called home, it's a bit embarrassing. And while I find it hard to forgive myself for acting out of character, it would be a devastating bout of self-hatred to act like it came from nowhere. My Hero Academia fans sucked. Quick to dogpile, slow to listen, overly sensitive and utterly distracted from the actual contents of the story when it doesn't concern their headcanons. I look at the state of the series and I'm confused. The story is no longer itself. It's no longer the same series I fell in love with, so why does it not only seem to have such a cult following, but actually a resurgence in love during its final moments? I don't mean to hyper-focus on toxic positivity, not unlike how I hyper-focused on shipping earlier. In general, the corrosion of fandom spaces is all in part due to the seeming bias and brand loyalty people have towards things they like, and frankly people never learning house etiquette. Hell, it should be no surprise that other mediums like music, specifically rap culture, and film culture have been affected in the same way, although the latter has to do a lot with pretentiousness. And if you think me, of all people, commenting on that is hypocritical, then congratulations, you missed the entire point of this video. And this can come from people who haven't even properly engaged with said media in question. People are so hell-bent on colluding the fandom experience that they will not even engage with the piece of media in question properly, just so that they can engage with fandom optics quicker. They will watch Markiplier's handsome mug play hours of a game instead of experiencing it for themselves, just so that they can hop into discourse or theory craft over a video game they've never even played. If I didn't know any better, these are probably the same people who skip through albums just to be a part of the conversation, or people who get their opinion from manga leaks or manga threads. And the worst part about it, you can't say nor do anything about this, about any problems you have with how others behave in a fanbase or consume things they quote-unquote like, because when met with this criticism, they will throw up their hands and use their label as an excuse for their behavior. I'm neurodivergent. My brain doesn't work the same as yours does. They jump down the kitchen counter and scream, "I'm gay," for all to hear. And while, as I've stated, I have a bone to pick with the people of color in these fan bases, a large subset of the behavior I've been talking about has come from white fans. Not to disparage their identity, but they're always the first to be entitled in these situations. I don't know why this needs to be said, but you can't use the fact that you're a gay little fat chud to excuse how you behave with other people, especially on the internet. It's no excuse to passionately dogpile those who disagree with a piece of media you probably haven't even really absorbed, especially again at the expense of people with perspectives you can never really understand, black or otherwise. Your whiteness exceeds any label that might marginalize you. Your skin color gives you more opportunities, more exposure, more attention. And while that doesn't mean you can't take part in spaces that might not be your own, it means you have to be careful that that same whiteness doesn't subconsciously make you act like you own the place, or you deserve to be heard over other fans. I used to think some of this was normal, as, again, at least weirdos are expressing themselves as they should in the spaces they created. But with the added rise of media illiteracy, people opting to be more mindless to the things they consume, I don't know. I don't think I can call something like this normal anymore. It's the same type of condescension and superiority complex I complained about the ALT fanbase having, along with its offshoots. It's sad, but I'm afraid that some of us have to admit when certain spaces just aren't made for us anymore. Which, it's fine. I needed to touch grass anyway. Hi, you guys doing alright? There's always been this debate in the anime community. Would you rather have a power scalar son or a shipping daughter? Someone who's, God I hate this word, but someone we call a dude bro who's only really in the medium to see action figures slam together or misconstrue events in the story to make their favorite characters look good, or a horny teenage fujoshi who obsesses over their favorite anime man of the week or geek out when girls kiss on screen to the point where this is the only thing they can really talk about. As funny as that debate is, because honestly, we're doomed, those are our only two options, the premise lately has been something that has been bothering me. You see, I would argue the toxically masculine and teetering on ignorant death battle junkie is the same as the neurodivergent queer who may be a little too woke for anyone's good. The anime fandom has this fascination with adding unnecessary subtext to an otherwise really bad manga or show. They justify the work's worst qualities because, well, look at its symbolism, look at its themes. And these pseudo-intellectuals say if you can't see it the same way, then you're just too dumb to even be involved in the medium. In a way, they were power scaling their own intelligence to mine, and what made it worse was that these genuinely weren't good people. They had inconsiderate politics and spoke as though they haven't seen a single progressive stride the planet has made in the last 2 decades. But then I thought about my own experiences with, say, the My Hero Academia fanbase, and it was all too similar despite the facade of a more inclusive and diverse culture. It was then I realized that these two sides aren't that different, because both subsets of Twitter have people who mindlessly consume media. See, most of the popular shonen people give non-existent implicitness to, agenda for, or have shipping wars over and parade as these positive beacons of fiction are series I just don't like. That doesn't make me special, but it's the root of the problem. I was able to think for myself and come to my own conclusions about these works. Instead of blindly enjoying something or going along with an overly positive mob, I chose to think differently based on my own reasons, and these fan bases wouldn't, or couldn't, so they hated me for it, because I wouldn't simply take things for what they were and smile unknowingly. I learned a long time ago that people will just blacklist you in incredibly ridiculous ways if you disagree with them, even if they're people in the community you feel honored to be able to connect with. Which is why, to me, a power-scaling son and the shipping daughter are just two cheeks of the same ass. They're just people who mindlessly like things and hate the fact that you don't. And that's the thing. We all lost. We as fandoms made fun of stories that other fandoms like. We did everything we could to discredit the fave of another person, but look at us. All of our favorite authors failed, in different ways, but failed nonetheless. And the ratio ranges, but for the most part, that's the consensus. As such, you would think this would be a time of unity, a time where we share in disappointment and angst, self-aware jokes about how trivial all this was, accepting criticism for how accurate it was in the end. And in a way, these fandoms did unite, but instead of an environment where we all reflected on what we could have had, fandoms are still united by this one mission, to appreciate what isn't there. Asta became the Wizard King. The mere fact he accomplished this goal undermines any issues leading up to that journey. Deku wasn't abandoned by his friends and given a last second here nigga damn DEI accommodation. You guys just took the manga leaks as fact. Jujutsu Kaisen isn't messy, broken, and contradictory of itself because Medulo resolved all of the series' plot threads. You just didn't understand it. And as this phenomenon went on, the hate mob got significantly worse. And maybe for this reason, maybe because of my personality, my support systems diminished slowly. It all just became a lonely experience. Sure, the whole internet could hate me and that does suck, but if the people closest to me couldn't be with me through that or understand how it made me feel, that's way worse. Maybe this isn't goodbye. Maybe I'll feel a spark I can't ignore in the future. Maybe if this video's reception is, for whatever reason, positive, it'll make me realize just how many people value what I have to say. But if none of that is the case, let me end with a warning. Before you jump the gun and mock the series that fell off, the series that someone you know loves while saying, couldn't be blank. Trust me, give it a few years. We'll all be on the same sinking Titanic, even if the majority of people aren't willing to realize that they've been drowning for over 10 years. Thanks for stopping by.